Hello, my name is Dr. Stanley Lang, and welcome to this broadcast. The question that I would like to ask of you today is, how does focusing on love decrease stress? How does focusing on love decrease stress? So, the series that we've been focusing on, as you know, has been on how to manage stress and how to heal stress, under the assumption that all of us live in a situation where we have a big gap between our reality and our hopes and expectations, and that in many cases we can't change that gap, but that gap alone causes us to feel stress. So if we focus on what I've reviewed is that if we focus on that gap, that increases our stress. And if somehow we can live with the gap but not focus on it, then that decreases our stress. So the question is, how does focusing on love decrease our stress? And I know that because of your interest in spiritual disciplines and the approach that you have to life, that loving is something that you know a lot about, and that in many ways you do it without thinking. But I'd like to spend just a few moments just to focus your attention on the idea of loving as a way to decrease stress, in a way that, in a sense, the way that God has wired us to decrease stress. So one of the things that I mentioned is that the gap between reality and expectation is a big portion of our experience of stress. So in this diagram, I'm showing that one of the top gap is a short gap, the bottom gap is a big gap, and so having some gap between our reality and our expectation is important to get anything done in life, because if we didn't have any kind of a gap, if we had everything exactly as we wanted, we'd never do anything. So the top gap represents the kind of distance that creates what I would call a creative energy to accomplish the things that we're supposed to do in our lives. So it's okay to have some gap there, but what we want to try to identify is when we've got the big gap between where we're at and where we want to be, and the amount of stress that it's causing. A lot of times that gap, the intensity of that gap is hidden. We just have this sort of vague sense of not being peaceful, and we're easily distractible. And so once we become aware of the big gap, the idea that I'm suggesting for you to focus on is that if you focus on loving instead of the gap, the problem, the issue, then your focus goes away from the thing that is making you unhappy, and the energy literally is sucked out of that reality expectation gap, and you're able to experience the natural things that happen to you through focusing on love. So when I talk about focusing on love, you got two options. You either try to do it by willpower, or you try to do it with God's help. So there's no way that you're going to be loving without intending to be loving. On the other hand, it's very difficult to be loving on your own willpower. Most of us struggle hard to try to stay in a loving state, and what I'm suggesting is that your best way to stay in that loving state is to focus on receiving God's love at the same time. So what I'm suggesting is that if we focus on love at the same time that we're focusing on giving love, if we're focusing on receiving love from God, then that is experiencing love as a gift. Now, the idea here is that if we will focus our attention and see that my main job for the next 15 to 30 minutes is to love. It's not to do whatever my work is or to be with whoever I'm with. That's the secondary goal. So the primary goal is to love. If I buy into that, if I see that and I accept it, and I make it happen in my life, that I'm focused on loving myself, loving God, and loving the people around me. If that's my focus, if that's my job, so to speak, then the other issues fade into the background. So I may be at work, I've got responsibilities there, but if I see the big gap between where I need to be at work and where I really am, that will stress me out. If, however, I look at that situation and I see that my goal here is to be loving now, me, loving God now, loving the people around me, I can do that right now, and I can experience the positive change in me that happens by having accomplished something so powerful. And if 15 minutes later that's still my big goal, my big job, then I will end up doing my other job even better, because I'm now focused on loving, which I'm giving of myself the best I'm giving to other people, whether I'm doing this at work, whether I'm doing this with family, or by myself. If my focus is on loving, then the awareness of this big gap between where I want to be and where I am in all these different levels of reality, it fades away. So when we focus on love, we're actually focusing in a real way on God. The scriptures talk about God is love, and so focusing on love is focusing on God, especially if we are trying to receive the gift of love from God in order to be loving to myself and to the people around me. So that's how focusing on love decreases stress. It takes my mind off of the gap, and so the less I am focused on the gap between my reality and expectation, the less stressed I feel. Secondarily, and more importantly, I receive a lot of healing energy from God as I focus on love. It just happens automatically, and it's way beyond what I'm giving out. I'm receiving back a whole lot more, and that is healing to me. So focusing on love is the most powerful thing, the most powerful thing that any one of us can do to decrease the effect of stress in our life. And I encourage you to take that as your job for the next week, just to focus moment by moment, like for the next 15 minutes, your job is to love. The 15 minutes after that, your job is to love. And you keep building that pattern, and eventually it just sort of becomes your new habit. And when you do that, the stress levels, I promise, will decrease in your life, and your experience of the goodness around you will increase, and your awareness of God will increase. So I hope you're able to do this, and I encourage you to share this concept with friends and family. Wish you well, God bless, and have a great day.